I'm sorry. Steven, you might be on mute.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's try that again. Take two. Hello and welcome to AWS Made Easy. Ask Us Anything live stream episode 37, Valentine's Day edition. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. And we're going to talk about how much we love cost savings today.
Absolutely. Sorry, I was talking over right when you were saying something. Go ahead.
Saying how are you doing? How was your weekend and how's your Valentine's?
Doing well. It's been a very busy weekend over here. As you can see, I have a new setup. Finally fiddled around with some lighting and stuff to try and match up with what you've got there at your end. So I had to kind of spruce up my end of things as well. But it's been a lot of fun. But the most exciting part is I've been trying to plan out my summer because we have a lot of AWS summits coming up this summer that we're planning to be in all through June, July, August. So lots of planning going on right now to figure out where we travel, how, where we meet all the customers and AWS folks. So we have an EBC as well planned in Seattle. So all of that planning has been underway this weekend. A lot of logistics to take care of. And funnily enough, I now have to figure out how to quickly get a whole bunch of visas for different countries. And it's going to be quite a nightmare.
I think we've talked about this before. This is one of those challenges that just it's incredibly complicated to get two countries to agree on certain things like visas. Some of my family are Aussie citizens, and some of them are US, and some are both. And the complications of one time I booked a flight and I didn't realize that Australian citizens needed a transit visa through Vancouver. And so since part of my itinerary didn't have that, we couldn't board. It was this big mess, and it ended up working out in the end. But just one of those little complications.
Yeah.
So I hope it goes well for you. I don't envy all the paperwork.
I love countries that at least issue a 10-year visa, so you do it once, then you don't have to worry about it for 10 years. So,
but it's amazing how much you feel at the mercy of whoever happens to see that forum and approve it.
The funniest question that I find, or now actually the hardest question I find in these forms is, hold on one second. Looks like my camera decided to do a trick on me and just shut off. Should be back in a second.
There you are.
There we go. Okay, so again, new equipment, there's going to be glitches. But the hardest problem, or the hardest question that I've had to answer on my visa these days is, which countries have you visited in the last 10 years, and list all of them and every visit. And I now carry 3 passports with me because I've run out of that many pages, and it's crazy. It's just answering those. There's just not enough space to answer those.
A lot. That's cool. My list is a lot shorter, but we've got time.
Great. Okay, so we have what about your weekend? Sorry.
Oh, well, we had the Super Bowl, and that was really fun. And it reminded here. I wanted to share a good picture. I put this on Twitter. This is me as a football player back in that's 21 years ago now.
Wow.
So I played senior offensive line and defensive line, and I picked the number 68 because when I was that age, I was also attempting to restore a 1968 Mustang. So I picked that.
Oh, wow.
That was fun. And then I was at my parents' house, and they happened to have saved this. So
that is neat.
Now, I think this makes it. This might overstate it. I was only ever in plays when the outcome was completely 100% guaranteed. Most of my role in that team was a living piece of practice equipment for the good players, but I had a good time nonetheless. I think it was fun.
That's cool.
Let's see. We're getting a little bit of comments. Interesting. Raul, new background. This is Daniel Rivera. Raul, new background and audio is on fire.
Thank
And
you.
then,
Thanks for that comment.
and then also
Uh,
might have power save on or eco mode. So we have to.
So I actually tried to fix that. I don't have power save on, nor do I have eco mode. I have a Canon 70 Mark II that's being used as a camera right now. But funnily enough, I had ordered this little adapter that basically acts as a battery for your camera, and I waited for about a month for Amazon to deliver it. But apparently, Chinese New Year and a whole bunch of supply chain issues in China caused this particular piece to be delayed beyond a month and a half. And in fact, it just arrived this morning. So what I did over the weekend was I hacked my camera, where I actually built the circuit to supply the funny 8.1 volts and about 4 amps of current to drive and charge or to drive this camera. So I might have to tweak that out a little bit more. And by the way, as I was trying this out a little earlier, this device that arrived on Amazon via Amazon today, that doesn't work, but my hack still does better than that. So I have to still figure out how to make it work really well.
Oh,
But we'll keep at it.
That's fantastic. Daniel is my cousin. He was the one who gave me a lot of advice on the color of this setup. And then once I got my camera, and I'm not a photographer, I called him and he said, okay, set this setting to this, set this setting to that, ISO, white balance, all this cool stuff that I'm still learning. I'm in the infancy. And so it was so neat to get his help. So I really appreciate that. And we're going to have some fun content. Actually, we're going to re-record a podcast. I didn't realize this is a funny glitch. On a Fuji camera, if you don't have the SD card in, you can hit record and it will give you a nice red light. It just isn't telling you that it's recording. It's just not recording it to anywhere. So we did a really fun chat that we're going to have to redo. But it was
got it.
Second time the charm for that one.
Okay.
I had a neat story. So I was at Amazon yesterday in the Frontier building. I had some meetings with some of the AWS sales folk there about how to save clients money. But we'll get into that. But then someone stopped me and said, "Hey, are you Stephen Barr?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Hey, I listened to AWS Made Easy, and I just started on the EC2 team." So I won't give his name out. But congratulations on the new role. I hope you're watching now, and we're going to get some coffee in the next week or two. So congrats on that. And it was really neat too. The first time meeting one of these spontaneous interactions from the live streams. That was really cool.
Yeah, really cool. And thanks again to the audience for watching and keeping us, or encouraging us to actually keep doing this show week after week. So we love doing it, and we're glad that it helps you guys as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really cool moment. So thank you. That was really fun. And please present your questions. All right. Well,
we have a manufacturer today.
We do. Oh, I want to share one more thing. Let me see if this is going to work. Present extra camera. 1 second here. This is the lovely background that my wife set up for Valentine's Day. We've got flowers.
Those flowers look lovely.
Candle, and then I'll highlight this. This is the love between AWS Made Easy, AWS Insiders. I think it's really neat. I think it really highlights our values. So thank you for setting that up. That was really nice.
Thank you so much, Joe. Okay. So to our packed agenda, what are we starting with, Stephen?
Let's jump right into, I think the one we're most excited about, the new Graviton announcement. So I've got a special show transition today.
Great.
All right. So there is
that's the Valentine. It should have been Valentine red. This is a little pink, but anyway.
All right. Let me share the article on the screen here. Let's put this on the screen.
Let's pull that one up.
All right. Great. This is the new Graviton 3 based general purpose M7G and memory optimized R7G EC2 instances.
I was so pleasantly surprised to see this in my inbox at 5:45 a.m. this morning. The new announcements. I've been waiting for the M's and the R's for so long because these would have been perfect processors for all the databases and all the memory intensive workloads. And finally, it's out. I posted on LinkedIn a few of the highlights over there. Number one is the DDR5 RAM that it uses is 50% faster than the previous generation DDR4. So that's amazing for the really memory intensive workloads. Second is these are 25% faster than your Graviton 2s, and they are 60% faster than the x86s out there. They are about, if I remember my numbers correctly, I think they're 6% more expensive than the Graviton 2s.
So that's
or the equivalent
all the
Graviton
other
2s.
numbers you were saying, 50%, 25%, 30%, and how much is the price difference? 6%.
It's just 6% more. But really what you should be looking at is the price performance. When you really look at it, the price for a given amount of performance, this is way cheaper than anything that's out there. And so it just completely makes sense to take every one of your databases, move them into the R7G instances, because all of your standard Postgres, MySQL, they will run really well on these instances. These are memory optimized for specifically those kind of workloads. So these are just no-brainers to move to right away. And of course, the M ones, the M7Gs, are also pretty neat for general purpose. They are faster, more memory, more performant, and overall way cheaper than x86s.
And it cites all the use cases. These are still general purpose.
They are still general purpose.
Microservices, services, gaming servers, data storage, caching, all those things.
So correct. And for Java applications, for example, there are a lot of folks who are running tons of Java applications. These M7Gs become an absolute no-brainer purely because your Java applications can take on more memory, faster performance. It just works better. Oh, and by the way, the thing that I love over here is the network bandwidth and the EBS bandwidth are all enhanced up to 30 Gbps network bandwidth and 20 Gbps to EBS. Of course, when you're on the lower tiers, like the mediums, you get a subset of that, but it's still plenty for most instances.
It's I've been doing a lot of deep diving into EBS lately, and before I'd see that number and say, wow, 20 gigabyte per second to EBS, that's great. Now I think, wow, you can fill up a really expensive volume really fast. If you're streaming 20 gigabytes per second to EBS, that's great. If you need to, that will cost you.
Yeah. But the thing is that, when you have a lot of stateless workloads, it's great to have that bandwidth because you can process stuff faster and then get done with it and then move on to the next workload. So, and that's where you want to leverage the cloud the most. For all these stateless workloads where you have a lot of processing that you just want to do in a transactional like manner, you want to do a tons of event processing. That's where you want all this bandwidth. You want all this ability to quickly process something right to your store, get done with it, move on to the next event.
Well, I guess like our friends at ShotStack, right, who are using Lambda functions, and you can have an EBS volume that had a video that you wanted to then manipulate with FFmpeg at a local high bandwidth way.
Correct.
Spin it up in a Lambda that lasts for 15 minutes at most, and then have it vanish again.
Exactly. I think they were using the C7Gs, if I remember that conversation correctly, because they also have a lot of compute. So they do have a lot of I/O on all of these video files, but they require a lot of compute for encoding all of those videos, and therefore it makes sense for them to use the C7Gs. But for a lot of other workloads, the M7Gs, and for databases, Elasticsearch or Elastic Cache, or whatever else you're using, it just makes sense to go with the R7G.
Here's the R7G specs here. More memory intensive. Look at that, 0.5 terabyte. And then metal, which we've talked about. They had to throw the metal in there.
I don't understand. I still don't understand the metal. And I saw that they posted, hey, we also provide metal instances. I don't know why. Like, why confuse the customer? Like, I bet that there are a bunch of newbies who are now thinking, oh, let's just buy the metal one instead of going in for something else. And I don't understand why. Why would you want to do metal?
Yeah, I completely agree. You lose a bunch of abstractions, and I guess if you're running legacy applications,
There is no legacy application running on ARM. That's the bottom line. Like, tell me one legacy application that's still running on, or that's been running on ARM so far. I know none.
well, here's some neat. This is a good visual. So 60% less energy consumption for the same performance. That's going to be a big one.
That's huge.
Because we're all thinking about energy consumption, carbon footprints, all those things, and being able to report on that. Okay, wow, 60% less for the same performance. That's a big deal.
Correct.
And look at all these 2x higher floating point performance. So I was actually talking to my two kids, older kids. We were doing a programming class, and we were playing around with equality and inequalities in Common Lisp, and we tried to say is 19.9999999 less than 20, and it said no. And I was surprised because I thought I was about to have this great teaching moment, and it turns out we're going to dive into a rabbit hole for a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, coming back to even the last one that you see in blue, the M6G R6G, there is 20% more enhanced networking bandwidth available between that and the M7G. So if you have any kind of processing where you're pulling stuff out of S3 or just processing a bunch of stuff that requires memory, these are perfect instances to get started with.
Yeah, that is really neat. And then they said if you're not running your application on Graviton yet, be sure to take advantage of Graviton Ready Start program, and also with a porting advisor, which we covered last week,
Correct.
and the Graviton Fast Start program. Just the difference between Ready Start is for partners, and Fast Start is the general resources for here's your compilers, here's all the different tools that you can use. So make sure to check this out. This is the Graviton Fast Start for the different platforms that you want to use. I wonder if some of the Graviton managed services will also use these new instance types.
I think the way they are defined, I think there are a bunch of them that are already on Graviton, and you wouldn't care about it because they're just completely managed. But anything that you're running as RDS where you are managing it yourself, you will need to explicitly move it over to the R7Gs.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So not totally managed like Elasticache, but a service. Okay. Neat. Okay. So they're in US East, US West, Ireland.
And they're launching. I'm going to give this one a 3.5.
Okay.
And again, I'm digging the product managers for introducing metal with this one because, again, it confuses customers. But overall, I love this announcement. It's long awaited. I think it's taken them over a year to come up with the M7Gs. C7G has been out for over a year now. And the M7G and the R7G have just finally come out. So super happy about this announcement. I definitely think it simplifies and definitely the way to go.
And so it's interesting that even though it's more choice, it is a simplifies because it's a choice that we're already used to, the M series, the R series, and the C series. It's well known, the trade-offs and the boundaries between those. And this just adds an ability to match your load to the instance type in a much better way. So you're not over provisioning one RAM, say, in order to get enough vCPUs and vice versa.
Correct. I'm just going to leave you with one last statement on this. For customers who are watching this or who will watch it in the future, please do not go for the metal. It does not make any sense. Stick with the regular R7Gs, the different instance types, and use them to service your workloads.
Yeah, absolutely. That could not agree more. All right. Well, let's take a short break. We're going to take a 30-second break, hear from our sponsor, from CloudFix, and then we're going to jump right back in. Okay, here goes.
Public
Perfect.
cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
These transitions really make me laugh.
I love the music. It's really fun browsing the stock music catalog. All right. I'm glad we could bring some levity to this subject. All right. Elasticache adds enhanced I/O multiplexing. I just put the article in the comments. Just looking at the numbers, what are we looking at here? It's a regular Elasticache for regular Redis 7, but we're in more throughput and more latency. So, and it gives an example using an R6G.X large with 5,200 concurrent clients, you can achieve 72% increased throughput and 71% decreased P99, so that's 99th percentile latency, compared with Elasticache for Redis 6. These are some big numbers. These are some big jumps.
Those are huge. And I think where this makes a very big difference is when you have a lot of Lambdas trying to process a whole lot of events in parallel, just using Elasticache to give you that very low latency output makes a very big difference when you have a whole lot of different Lambdas calling Elasticache all at the same time. And if you have a great, hit rate or a great hit ratio, a cache hit ratio, I mean, you're golden, because these Lambdas can process and finish up very quickly. You can get great, boost up your concurrency of the total number of Lambdas that can run in parallel, and you can finish up, processing all the events in a short order. It does make a big difference on how efficiently stuff runs. For every second that each Lambda takes longer to run, you can compound that by the total number of concurrent Lambdas that are running to just see how much it's going to cost you in the long run. So every second that you shave off from your Lambda runs makes a very big difference. I know a lot of folks talk about Lambdas running for 15, 20 minutes. Again, I think those are anti-patterns for Lambda particularly. In an ideal world, you want the Lambdas to finish up within a second or two and then move on to the next event, because you don't want a Lambda hogging all those resources. It's going to bottleneck your concurrent processing.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because you can launch an unlimited number of Lambdas effectively. And so if they're running, I guess that's called Little's law from queuing theory, where the number of running Lambdas is the arrival rate times the dwell rate. And so if you have an arrival rate that's high and a dwell rate that's high, then you're going to have a huge amount going at any one time. So
that is correct. And the problem with Lambdas in particular also becomes that you do have concurrency limits that are in place. So when your arrival rate is very, very high, you might actually find that when they're sitting in the queue for a while before they can be processed, you may not realize, but the backlog of that can pile up really, really quickly. And so in an ideal world, you want to keep the Lambdas as short-living as possible. If you have really long-running jobs, it might actually be more efficient to run them on an EC2 instance or a Kubernetes cluster as an auto-scaling group where it can scale up and down and run as long-running jobs. Lambdas running for minutes at a time is really not cost-effective.
I mean, often I've found that, and a lot of the frameworks that you're working with, they want, if you're using Lambda in the context of an API, it's going to want that API to return within a second or two. And when you're connecting up, say, automation, they really don't like to wait 10, 20, 30 seconds.
I mean, API Gateway has a limit of 30 seconds. So if, that's the longest that you can wait for a request if you're using API Gateway in front of a Lambda. And so your Lambda must return stuff back within 30 seconds in the worst case scenario. But I think 30 seconds, like I said, is still way too long. Should probably be way shorter. And sorry about the segue into Lambdas in general, but it just boils down to, this particular announcement about Elasticache and Redis. Any peripheral services that provide data to Lambdas, if they are able to reduce the time it takes to service those data requests, it makes a huge, big difference to the Lambda processing time. And that's one example of how this really benefits saving tons of costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then bringing it out, what's our cost-based insight for the multiplexing Elasticache for Redis? What's, I think, the main driver of the savings from this? And I think we discussed this earlier, when you're using managed services, these type of things get developed for you with AWS, right? When you're using Redis, no one had to, well, I'm sure someone requested it, but all the other people who didn't request it all of a sudden have this and they get to use it. They get these big gains for no investment on their end other than paying their AWS bill.
Exactly. I think a lot of folks discount the costs associated with managing services and opportunity costs lost when you don't manage them well. When you account for those two, the managed services provided by AWS, for example, become a no-brainer because they have uptime guarantees. They have the best practices in how to manage these services effectively for you as a customer. Why wouldn't you take it up? Like you pay cents on a dollar for the service being managed versus trying to do it all by yourself.
Well, that's a really neat insight, and it goes to our paradigm that we've been talking about a lot as a cloud fix. Is, well, what are the 3 steps to achieving cost savings? And you talked about this in your Anaheim talk. There's the first step is get all the little things straightened out, right? Your S3 intelligent tiering, your EBS, and then your second tier, managed services. That's what gives you that 20 and 30% jump. And then your big order of magnitude is the big re-engineering.
Yeah. And I often hear the excuse, hey, our setup is bespoke and therefore it wouldn't be right to use a managed service in our scenario. But I think as it was phrased by, I forget who on our team phrased it, but someone said bespoke solutions or bespoke requirements have bespoke problems that cost orders of magnitude more to resolve.
You don't want bespoke problems.
You absolutely do not want a bespoke solution for something like a cache. You want the cache to be as simple, as straightforward, and as performant as possible with 0 to no downtime.
Exactly.
So that, you want that to be hardened as much as possible, and don't try to do something custom or bespoke here.
All right. Well, what is our big picture view of Elasticache for Redis? How do we rate this one?
I think this is a solid 4. Actually, I'd give it a 4.5. This is a very simple, straightforward announcement. Makes complete sense, better performance, makes a big impact on costs, and it definitely simplifies.
And you don't have to do anything.
You really don't have to do anything. In fact, you could start saving money right away because these instances are going to be faster. Your Lambdas will run a lot faster. Yeah. Just makes sense.
All right. Well, we're going to take another quick break, hear about CloudFix, and then when we come back, we've got one more article to talk about, and then we're going to do a deep dive into IO1 and IO2 to GP3. So stay tuned for that. All right. I'm going to queue up this transition.
Is your AWS bill going up? CloudFix makes AWS cost savings easy and helps you with your cloud hygiene. Think of CloudFix as the Norton Utilities for AWS. AWS recommends hundreds of new fixes each year to help you run more efficiently and save money. But it's difficult to track all these recommendations and tedious to implement them. Stay on top of AWS recommended savings opportunities and continuously save 25% off your AWS bill. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right, the network of bots, so smart and sweet. Okay, network of bots for Amazon Lex. Amazon Lex, we like Amazon Lex a lot.
We do.
Raul, you want to take this one? What do we?
Sure. So here's the interesting thing that's happening in enterprises. We are starting to see a huge amount of use of chatbots to answer a lot of questions. And as these large language models are getting better and better at answering questions, the chatbot interface just has kind of blown out in terms of usage. So the challenge, however, is that when you design a bot, you design it for a specific domain. You are talking about, so for example, you might have a bot that specifically talks to your CRM. You might have a bot that talks to your Zendesk. You might have a separate bot that talks to your finance system or your ERP system. Now, designing all these different bots and going to different bots to answer different questions just feels cumbersome, right? In today's day and age, you are used to ChatGPT, where you ask a question and no matter what the domain, you expect an answer. So the way around that for enterprise scenarios is to have this network of bots where you effectively have what we call a router that sits in front of the request. It is capable of understanding what your intents are and routing your request to the appropriate bot that might have been written for the specific system. So you can create this unified interface for your customers who use these bots, but internally have the request routed to the appropriate bot that you might have already written up.
It's interesting. We've all experienced that when you call into a hotline, maybe to track your missing package that's running late, and it's asking you questions, and behind the scenes there's some tree and some router, which is okay, I have to get the right phrase so I get routed to the right department.
Correct.
And it's funny how there's almost this convergence in that I notice that when I'm speaking to those automated systems, I'm now just trying to speak in keywords to trigger the right thing. And the bots are getting smarter, and we're adapting to the bots as well in order to make sure they work for us. And so it's neat that we can have this network of bots. And some people think that maybe artificial general intelligence will be a network of specific skills that then get added together in some useful way. So who knows where this fits into that perspective. It is really neat that they can have this unified end user experience to combine all these different intents into a single bot. So that way you're not being routed from one place to another. You can, and they can be developed independently because there's different teams and different expertise, but then unified from the end user's perspective.
Correct. Yeah, so I think this one simplifies. I'll definitely give it a simplifies because it simplifies app development from the standpoint of, it's almost like object-oriented programming in the sense that you can focus on your domain and independently build these bots across various different domains and then combine them together with this little router. I have yet to play around with it. It's one of my weekend projects that I have planned for this particular weekend, but I'm really looking forward to leveraging this. So for all of my personal tasks and stuff, I actually have my own chatbot that does all the different things that I have to do. And I'm going to try and get this hooked up to have all these multiple bots hooked up to this one simple system.
That'll be really neat. So you can leverage it for your home automation, home assistant, all the different things that you have automated. You can have one interface to it.
Yeah, even for work. Here's a little insight that I had a few years ago when Lex first came out. The thing that I always struggled with was the ability to create a UI for a bunch of APIs that I had created. It's really easy to create APIs, but creating a UI that beautifully gives you that experience of seamlessly doing what you need to do is incredibly hard. And You need specialists who've spent years kind of mastering that talent or mastering their art. And I, for one, don't have that at all. So one of the shortcuts that I found very effective in terms of even designing an API and then using an API was to start using it like a chatbot. Okay, so if I wanted a UI that presented me with certain kind of data, I would literally write an API with those parameters, which were your slots, and the output would, via the chatbot, be a URL, which literally just renders the one page that I care about. So I ask a question in natural English, and I get back a response, which is a URL that I click, and it's got exactly what I want in the format that I want, without having to figure out how I'm going to lay out that particular page in a massive UI. So
that's really neat. Okay, so you can have the one choice that if it says select, I don't know, the temperature, if you're automating your thermostat, and so do you want it to 19, 20, 21, 23, 24, or whatever it is. And it's just the one choice you have, where you don't have to have an entire UI that navigates.
I don't have to figure out how to do drop downs and stuff like that. But just to narrate or put this in a concrete example, when I have to look at, specific P&L, reports and stuff like that, and I need it sliced a particular way, I hate the Excel sheets, or I hate, systems like NetSuite, where there are these standard dashboards that don't really give you exactly what you want, for a simple reason that the dashboard wasn't designed for the one question you want answered. And instead, with the API call, I actually get the data back, and it can render. So I basically have certain parameters. I fill out the parameters the way I want those to be filled out, and I get the data in exactly the format that makes sense to me for my use cases, for my business. And then it just renders out the one dashboard, and that's it, nothing else. And then I don't have to figure out, okay, in NetSuite, I go to the landing page. After the landing page, I have to navigate to this other section. In that section, I have 4 other subsections. Then I have to choose my business unit. I have to choose my class. I have to choose a bunch of other categories. And then maybe I will get the report I want.
And it's a hard problem to solve. I mean, that's why Tableau is so successful, why QuickSight's such a good product. I mean,
right.
Slicing and dicing a dashboard into the actual information you want, that isn't, right. If that was easy, it would have solved it.
I agree.
And it's not.
But just navigating to the right dashboards, to the right data, it's incredibly hard. So I found it really easy to just write a simple, chatbot agent that effectively exposes. I mean, there's an API backing it. So the chatbot agent basically calls the API, gets the data, and gets you to the result. It's also a great tool. Sometimes when you're building API, you're trying to think about the use cases that people might have. And it's easier to default to the objects, but that doesn't really give you the right API. When you start building out your UI, you're suddenly lost because the API does not match the UI that you want to create. Instead, when you start thinking of it in terms of, okay, I'm going to build a chatbot, and here are the questions I'm going to ask the chatbot. When you start designing your API with that in mind, you get way closer to the final outcome of trying to build out a set of API that will service a UI fairly well. You might still need to make a few tweaks, but by and large, I think you'll be better off while designing these API.
And we can see that in certain APIs where the abstraction leaks through, and you see the terminology being very much tied to the underlying data model, whereas you just really want to answer the question that you're asking and not talk about certain objects and whether it's tasks or anything like that. You really just want to answer your question.
Exactly. And I think that's the whole reason why the chat interface, now that the language models are getting so sophisticated, I think the chat interface is going to be the way you want to interact with the system. You want to ask it whatever you want to ask, in whatever way you want to ask. You want the system to be intelligent enough to decipher it and then go out and seek the data that's requested. And this just opens up, the whole world for how you build out applications.
And I think we talked about this in a very early episode where any science fiction is set in the future, they're talking to the spaceship, right?
Yeah,
Saying,
exactly.
computer, replicate me, 3 servings of Romulan ale or whatever it is, right? You're not putting in identifiers and writing SQL queries. You're just telling the computer to go do something and it's doing it.
Exactly. And it makes you question, why would you want to build out UIs for a vast majority of scenarios? Like the UI experience feels flawed because every time you have to click multiple buttons to get to what you want, or type out a bunch of stuff, or do drop downs and scroll through stuff, the interface feels flawed. I think the best example of the non-UI interface is Apple CarPlay, or I think Android has a similar experience. But I don't end up using Siri for 90% of what I do on my day-to-day basis. But when I'm in my car, everything happens through that interface. And I can't stand to touch the screen nonstop to get anything done. It's very distracting. It's just feels not right. And
Yeah.
if you could do that for everything else, if that could just seamlessly operate the same way everywhere else, I think it's going to change the way we do things.
It's neat that we are we're close, right? We've got almost all the building blocks in place. I'm guessing this is one of those 5-year things where I'd love to be able to speak out loud and have my computer kind of always listening during the workday, but not using these awkward commands, but just being able to kind of have a train of thought that then gets processed and semantically sorted into the right buckets.
Correct.
Well, bringing it back to the article, what do we?
We just kept talking and forgot about the article.
No, I think it's great.
I love this.
It's inspirational, right? And that's the point, right? Is that these things, and they sit in this context that's much bigger than this one little feature. That's why we talk about when a new instance type comes out in a certain region, we say, well, hey, let's think about this instance type. It's back on our radar.
Yep. But I love this. This definitely simplifies. It simplifies from the standpoint of from the user experience standpoint. Yeah. So I definitely say it simplifies there. I will give you more updates on this maybe next week after I played around with it over the weekend. And I would definitely give this a 4-star. I went through the documentation here. Seems straightforward. I just have to play with it myself before commenting more on it.
And anyone who thinks it's easy to build a UI, I challenge you to try and make it through the React tutorial. I've started it about 6 times. I can get a button to go up and down. I can count from 1 to 10 and back, and that's as far as I've made it.
Correct. And I think I've struggled with the step before that, where should you use React, or should you use Vue.js, or should you use Next.js, or should you just use Flutter? And just that analysis paralysis of deciding which framework is, just stops me at the first step itself.
Or even the step before that. Oh, should I do this all server side? Maybe I should learn Clojure.
Correct.
Well, maybe I should. Is there a better way? I can write my own framework that runs it and then put it over a WebSocket. And then...
That's just a rabbit hole of these decisions that I hate making. So the chatbot actually is what I've kind of come to use very, very extensively. A lot of my automation on my own desktop for my regular, workflows are all governed by chatbots, and a little command on my chatbot executes a bunch of standard things that I have to do every single day at work and at home. And I just find it easy to
say more about that with my own home automation.
Because I find I can write an API in a matter of minutes. Writing UI can take me days.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, let's have one more word from CloudFix, and when we come back, we're going to do a deep dive into IO1 and IO2, and should you use them, or is GP3 good enough? All right, we'll be back in a minute.
Public cloud costs going up and your AWS bill growing without the right cost controls? CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by focusing on AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe with zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. The best part? With your approval, CloudFix finds and implements AWS fixes to help you run more efficiently. Visit cloudfix.com for a free savings assessment.
All right, we are back, and then let's have the transition into all right, deep dive into EBS. And this is a blog that we worked on. It is now live on the CloudFix site. I've posted the link in the comments. All right, so this is optimize AWS Elastic block storage by migrating your IO1 and IO2 volumes to GP3. So I started the article with this quote: "The technology you use impresses no one. The experience you create with it is everything." And so the idea is, if you're running a site or an application, your end users don't care whether you're on IO1, IO2, GP3. They will never know.
Correct.
But your CFO will definitely know which one you're using, because IO2 is really expensive. So we came up with this fun comparison. IO1 and IO2, it's like an SUV. And I used to live in Australia, had big old Land Cruisers, and they were fun, but we use them for their purpose. But most of the SUVs you see, you want to think, okay, I want to go through the mud, I want to have tow these big trailers, I want to go over the desert and exist off the grid for days at a time. And it's a fun thing to do. But then if you get a vehicle that can do that, you might find it's a bit much for groceries and at soccer practice. So, Ro, you had mentioned a particular SUV that you thought of.
So those of you who don't know, I lived in Dubai for nearly 13 years. And in that period, I have seen incredible, I wouldn't say SUV, this particular one. And this one is huge.
So there's the guy standing by it.
So if you're driving from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, actually a little beyond Abu Dhabi towards the empty quarter deserts, you will see this on the way there.
So it would be cool to say, okay, I need this. I have a legitimate use case for this giant Hummer, right? But I think it would be hard to really justify it.
Even a regular Hummer, for that matter. Yeah. Like, how do you justify having a regular Hummer?
That's
unless
hard.
You were going out to war in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, exactly. But and that's what IO2 is. IO2 is so powerful, so capable. I mean, look at the numbers here. It's 99.999% durability. You can get, and with the Block Express, you can get 64 terabytes on demand, 256,000 IOPS, which is huge, 4 gigabytes per second. You can multi-attach. What else can you do? The latency is sub-millisecond, and it's extremely consistent. So you could just put all the data in the world you want into IO2, especially IO2 Block Express, and it's going to take it. Now, GP3, the GP in GP3 is general purpose. And to continue with this automotive analogy, let's think about the minivan.
The platinum trim. The minivan can also be equipped with a third electric motor to power the rear wheels. And check out the 18 cup holders, 7 USB ports, 4-zone climate control, onboard Wi-Fi, rear entertainment system, and a voice amplification system so parents can communicate better with the kids in the back. Toyota pretty much thought of everything for the...
All right, so those are some practical day-to-day things you could actually use. 18 cup holders, USB ports, an intercom for the back. They've thought about the actual day-to-day use case and thought, okay, what really helps? Does being able to survive in a war in the desert? No, you don't need that. But 18 cup holders and some USB ports, yeah, that makes life a lot easier for a day-to-day basis. They're efficient, they're inexpensive. And that's GP3 in a nutshell. It's performance-wise, it's very adequate. It can cut costs by half, and sometimes even less than that, as we'll go over. And so we have the sentence: to optimize EVS spend, let's embrace the minivan and migrate from IO2 or IO1 to GP3 when it fits. And this piece of art that here, I got this generated by Midjourney to generate a practical. I generate a minivan and an SUV next to each other at the grocery store. It generated that one. So a little bit of the next to each other is not well specified then, but nonetheless, I think it's kind of fun. So EBS, Elastic Block Store, we've talked about that. It's about dynamic storage that can attach to your EC2 instance, to your Lambda. We've got IO2, we've got GP3. And then when we look at this comparison chart, the place where IO2 can't be beat is durability. But we look at the numbers, 99.999 for IO2, 99.9 to 99.8 for GP3. So they're both really, really good. We're not talking about, they're both incredible. And for contrast, a regular hard disk fails at about 3% per year for a regular spinning metal hard disk that you manage yourself. And a regular solid state disk drive, they fail at about 1.5% per year. So these are both phenomenally better than hardware that you would manage yourself. But that being said, there's still a bit more durability. But then on the volume size, okay, so GP3 and IO2, which is the main subject comparison, they can both be up to 16 terabytes. In terms of IOPS, GP3 can support 16,000. IO2 can support 64,000. So the question is, for which situations is IO2 provisioned at 16,000? That's a situation. There's a big Venn diagram here with a lot of overlap, and especially when it comes to the day-to-day use case. And that's where it comes back to that SUV versus minivan, right? Most of the things a minivan can do and the SUV can do. There's a pretty big overlap. And the part outside that overlap, you may not need. So correct. Looking at this comparison, yeah, they both have GP3, IO1, IO2. They have equivalent max throughput per volume. So that's this part here, this 1,000 megabyte. It's only the block express that gets faster.
Right.
Let's see. Raul, any other comparisons that you can think of between the GP3 and the IO2 to IO1?
No, I think this is what I would say. In 99% of the scenarios, like the durability over here, you are not going to need that level of durability or performance. There are very few scenarios where you need those kind of setups. And even then, what I invariably find when I look at customers' accounts and their usage is everything from the dev environment to the staging environment and all the way up to prod, they will provision massive amounts of, IO2 if they even remotely require that, and end up spending an insane amount of money on it. Usually IO2 instances are attached to systems like databases or, very high performance, very high read write operation systems. But when you really go down and analyze what the real traffic is, you find that they are a fraction of what the peak performance of a GP3 is. So in the vast majority of cases, just switching over to GP3 will more than suffice. For anyone who's using IO2s by default, I would say go back and look at your CloudWatch metrics for how much your peak IOPS looks, or what your peak IOPS looks like over the last 30 days. And I will bet that for 90% of those volumes, you could very easily just switch over to GP3 and do just fine.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the thesis of this article. It's saying if the durability provided by GP3 is sufficient, and so that we can't judge that automatically. That's a judgment call.
Correct.
But the required IOPS is less than or equal to 16,000. That we can find from the data. That's in your CloudWatch. Have you used this or not?
Correct.
And if the required IOPS is less than or equal to 16K, then there's potential to migrate that volume. And then looking at the prices, this is So we're looking at the per gigabyte number. Looking at this, so IO2 is significantly more expensive. So 4.5.
It's 50% more. It's more than 50% expensive.
Plus, you
50%
don't
more
get the free tier of IOPS here.
Correct.
3,000 free IOPS. And
Correct.
the unit IOPS cost is far more. It's 10 times more.
It's 10 times more, exactly. So you end up paying a bomb for that extra durability when you most likely don't really need it. This is for extreme scenarios where this is an absolute must.
Here's an example calculation. So if you need 5 terabytes, it's 6,000 provisioned IOPS and 500 megabytes per second of throughput. So with GP3, the neat thing about it being general purpose is that you can adjust IOPS and throughput dynamically. Right. You have these two different levers. Whereas in GP2, you have to make it's all proportional to the volume size.
Volume size, yeah.
So with GP3, you have fine-grained control to get exactly what you want. So here we'll look at the calculation. You've got 5,000 times the storage rate. And then in this case, we wanted 6,000 provisioned IOPS. Well, you get 3,000 for free. So you have to pay for 3,000. And that's at half a cent each. And then in this particular application, we needed 500 megabytes per second of throughput. We get 125 for free. So subtract and then multiply that by the throughput rate, $430 per month. The equivalent IO2 price is what you pay.
$1,000.
Yeah, $1,015 a month. So GP3 is 42% of the cost of IO3, or you're saving the inverse of that. You're saving 58%.
That's a huge amount saved.
And this is for a relatively small volume size in terms of production loads. Now, AWS had a really interesting comparison of, well, what if you're running a database and you need a cluster and your overall throughput requirements are very high, higher than either IO2 or GP3. Well, then what you do, you can use clusters of volumes. So let's look at a cluster calculation. In this case, and there's a good blog post by AWS. Let me put this in the comment here. This is about specific to databases. Say if you need a lot of IOPS. Well, I'll pull up this post really quick. So in this case, they're saying, what if you needed 356,000 IOPS? So these are the specifications. I'll go back to ours. Okay. So here's a 4-node Oracle database where each node needs 12 terabytes of storage. So here's how you could do it. With IO2 Block Express, you can provision 4 3 terabyte volumes.
Correct.
And so that gets you your storage requirement. Then you can provision it at 22,500 IOPS for a total of 90,000. So 4 times that is 90,000. You need throughput per volume. So that gives you your per volume cost, and then your 4-node cost. And then if you're running a 4-node database, it's 4 times that. Correct. So contrast to GP3, well, you need to use more volumes because you need to hit the total IOPS. Right. So with GP3, you can get 16,000 IOPS per volume. So if you provision 6 times 16,000, 96,000, you can provision this much throughput, and that'll give you sufficient throughput. See, the IO Block Express, you're getting way more throughput than the application needs.
Correct.
And you're paying for extremely expensive IOPS. So in this case, you get literally a sixth.
6 times.
Yeah. 6 times the cost for using IO2 Block Express. And
Correct.
This is all driven by your 10x expensive IOPS. So if you can manage to, so the neat thing is you're not as limited by those 16,000 IOPS of GP3 as you think, because you can fix that at the application layer. And that's what is really, really cool. And also with the durability, right? You're already in a database that's replicated. They've got durability in the database layer as well. So it's not as important at the file system layer. Plus you probably already have hot replicas, all those other things. They're giving you your durability numbers.
Yeah.
So how do you migrate? Well, The neat thing about migration is that it's straightforward on an individual node level. You need to figure out how many IOPS you need and how much throughput you need. So that's the two questions you need to answer. And then which identify the volumes that need to be migrated. But then once you've done that, you can then either do it in the console by just clicking the modify volume, or so you modify volume, you've put in your IOPS, your throughput, or if you're using the CLI, you can just enter in that one command. And the cool thing is this happens while the volume's in use, which is pretty
Any machine restart or anything like that.
Yeah, you can change the volume type and the IOPS, the size, everything while it's running with no downtime. So that's pretty neat. Kind of figured out how to do that. But
completely agree.
But what if you have a lot of accounts and a lot of volumes? And are you going to implement the process for identifying throughput requirements for all of your IO2 and make sure that that's done correctly? And that's where CloudFix comes in. So we've automated that process of identifying these volumes that are candidates to be migrated. And then using CloudFix, it will then present to you, here's all of the migrations it can perform, and the choice is up to you. You click the button and it'll do it. And you can
one of the neat things about CloudFix is taking these very simple, standard, straightforward recommendations and automating them for scale. And that just makes sure that you don't have to spend your time figuring all this stuff out. It's just automated. It is AWS certified. It goes and executes every week and keeps saving you money.
Exactly. Because even if you did a one-time audit, you're still going to have engineers who are instantiating IO2 volumes and whatnot. And that just happens in big organizations. Right. So even if you did it once, you're still going to find over time other ways to save. And the savings here are so big. And it's not as interesting a story as the big rewrite where you wrote everything into serverless and you saved all this money, but it's a huge amount, right? Going back to the calculation up here, just for this.
It makes sense. I mean, ones like these can actually potentially fund all your big projects. The savings from this could very easily fund a bunch of large, big projects.
Yeah, exactly. That's what really makes a difference. Is all these little things. You can spend your engineering time on that, or you can spend your engineering time on the big projects and let CloudFix take care of those little things along the way. So you can focus on the bigger ones.
Exactly. Okay. I think today we went 5 minutes or so over.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize. All right. Thank you for sticking around. Really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat. We'll be here next week. Oh, well.
Yep. And my camera is time to end the show as well. But I'm going to give it a quick reset and say goodbye. And see you all next week.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Have a good one. Talk to you later.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Is your AWS public cloud bill growing? While most solutions focus on visibility, CloudFix saves you 10 to 20% on your AWS bill by finding and implementing AWS recommended fixes that are 100% safe. There's zero downtime and zero degradation in performance. We've helped organizations save millions of dollars across tens of thousands of AWS instances. Interested in seeing how much money you can save? Visit cloudfix.com to schedule a free assessment and see your yearly